meters apart, speaking moistly, speaking moistly. Keep 2 meters apart, speaking moistly.
All right, welcome to Speaking Moistly. Today my guest host is Kelly. How are you doing, Kelly?
I am doing not too shabby. How about yourself, Mark?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm doing great. It's beautiful outside. It's gorgeous. The weather is nice.
Not here, but
no.
I'm very happy for you, I swear.
Fair enough. Kelly is from Saskatchewan, if you don't know. So what is the weather terrible out there? What's going on?
We've just had a lot of rain and wind. It's not normal for this area. Southern Saskatchewan's all wind all the time, but we normally get some shelter, but it's been rainy and windy. And then we had this break of summer, just hot, beautiful day for 2 hours, and then it went away. And who knows? I mean, it's Canada. It's all over the map. Just wear layers, right?
Fair enough. Yeah, makes sense. Fair enough. Well, here in Ontario, we're on like a 3 or 4 day sunny streak, and it's like 27 Wonderful. Or something like that. So it's nice. Apparently, the evenings are supposed to get warm, which not so wonderful.
A good old warm evening, bonfire.
Yeah, but when it gets too hot overnight, when it's like 28 degrees overnight, you're like, oh, I don't know about that. That's all true. Air conditioning, not so good. But if you've got allergies, okay, let's get into this.
All right. Important
Canada, yeah. Everybody just watched Kelly and I catch up. All right, so yesterday the UN said Norway and Ireland, please, you guys win. First ballot. We didn't win. Heartbreaking, or did you expect it? What is your reaction to the Canada not winning our very expensive, coveted UN seat?
I don't know if I'm surprised or not. I mean, it could have gone either way. I wasn't sure how the UN felt about our dear leader, but I'm certainly not too disappointed that we didn't get the seat. I really don't know why we were vying for it, other than all kinds of interesting theories you can get into that I won't hear. Mm-hmm. But I certainly am not feeling sad about it. I'm not doing any happy dances, but I'm definitely not too sad about it. I think either way, what's disappointing to me is the amount of money that was spent, and the amount of project money and sort of like bribe seeming type things that were being put out internationally, and the amount of sort of canoodling with dictators. And what's really sickening to me is how much focus and actual dollars were spent on obtaining this seat, while we have so many other things to deal with. So, I mean, whether we get it or not, it wasn't really a big deal to me. It was just a matter of being disgusted by how much work and money went into that. But I think it's a little bit funny that we didn't get it, since he was ripping on Harper back when he didn't get it. And I believe Harper actually had more support from the UN, did he not?
Yeah, and Harper didn't trade in his principles, so say people. And actually today Mr. Scheer was in the House of Commons questioning Trudeau on was it worth it. There's a 5-minute video I tweeted out earlier talking about how was it worth it, and Trudeau didn't answer the question once, which is not all that surprising.
He didn't answer color.
We had a little technical difficulty, so I paused it. I was hearing an echo. Okay, back to this. So it is not surprising that Trudeau didn't answer a question, and it's even less surprising that he danced around. It was a full 5-minute video, and Scheer was like, was it worth it? Was it worth it? And Trudeau kept saying, how they always go to their talking point, their speaking lines that are written down. So Trudeau just kept going back to that well. So yeah, I'm glad that we didn't win. None of the people in my friend circle, even if they were talking about it, it was, I hope that we don't win that seat. That would be a disaster.
Yeah, well, I don't want more involvement with the UN. That's definitely just not on my list of things that I think are good for Canada. But I mean, ultimately, it's to me, will it change anything? He's still vying for world admiration as the most virtuous of them all. So we'll see how this moves on moving forward. I feel like you can't change his stripes, I don't think, on that one.
Yeah, well, and I mean, he's very committed to his thought process, his ideology, whatever you want to call it. But he believes himself to be, and this is Justin Trudeau, basically at the end of when Harper lost his seat in 2010, and Trudeau was saying, Canada uses a megaphone when they should be engaging people in bilateral meetings and blah, 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 blah. He was saying, I can do it better. And he had a chance to do it better, and he didn't, and he lost. And he got less support than Stephen Harper, who he criticized, right? So it's like, wearing that as and going around the world, I don't know what other what other things that he could do diplomacy-wise around the world, other than funding women's health in all sorts of countries, and that's just spending taxpayer dollars to not really help Canada. And I still don't understand how that helps Canada in one way or another. But it seems inappropriate.
It's very true. And he, I believe he has a bit of an inflated opinion of himself as to how the rest of the world sees him. And Ezra Lamant put a tweet out earlier today about sort of his view on it. And really, it's kind of just sad to watch him sort of fawning all over this. And people are really, he feels that, Trudeau just got used. Oh, sure, we'll take your money and pretend that we support you. And then at the end of the day, they really don't. And I don't think Trudeau is a respected world leader. He can pull out all the flowery language he wants, and he thought that was going to win him the seat. I think there's a little more to it than that. And so I'm wondering how his ego feels today. I want to feel really bad for him, but I don't. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even really about feeling bad. It's like what's next, right? Like, what are you going to do now? Like, you've had your whole your whole time in public service, or your whole time as prime minister, vying for this seat and didn't get it. And so what's your focus now? Is it going to be Canada, or
Yeah, I'm very
focus
curious
now on home, or what?
This has been this big thing, and now it's like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
There's this big buildup, and now we're just sort of all waiting to see, are you going to focus back on the country, or do you care about the country? Do you care about our sovereignty? It doesn't seem like he cares about any of those things.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious, all of this, just all of it, the way that Parliament is going. I'm fascinated daily by what's going on.
And especially, like, me too. It's interesting, the racist accusations. So we'll get into the racist stuff. I came across this body break thing on June 16th. Today's the 18th. And I thought, keep fit and have fun never said to me anything about racism. I don't know that there was any kind of inclination that Hal Johnson and Joanne McLeod, like, it was about racism. But now in 2020, they're rewriting the past and saying, here's the global tweet. It says, you think the body break was started because of fitness? Well, it wasn't. It was started to combat racism. Like, I think that's just like taking your history and being like, you thought this, but it's wrong. You're wrong again. It was about racism this whole time, like.
Do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you have a conversation about that? It's like, when Trudeau's refocusing, I mean, if this is an example of Trudeau under Canada, with Trudeau focused on the external UN seat and, doing all of that stuff, I hate to see what becomes of our country when he's really focused on things. I mean, even yesterday in the House of Commons, like, our history is being rewritten with Hal Johnson and Joanne McLeod, and in the House of Commons, leaders are being ejected for using inappropriate language in the House. Jagmeet Singh's calling a Bloc MP racist. You're racist if you don't say that the RCMP has systemic racism. And I just think, what a slippery slope to go down for our country. And we've been traveling down this. We've been talking about this for a few years, you and I, if people have been paying attention, which I'm sure there are a lot who have, but a lot who haven't. And here we are now, where leaders are not even able to carry on the government business without throwing in barbs about racism under every single rock, including in the House of Commons of Canada, where there's a turban-wearing Sikh as the leader of one of the major parties. You racists!
He's been doing okay here in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right.
Plenty of opportunities. I do not like Singh whatsoever, and I've said before, people always like to accuse you of racism as soon as you critique a person of color in Parliament. I will assure everybody publicly, it has nothing to do with the color of his skin or his beliefs. It has everything to do with his attitude. He's a very arrogant man. And in Saskatchewan, they've lost their seats. Any NDP hold that was in this conservative province is gone, because he disappointed so many people with so many areas of his leadership, ruining the MP Aaron Weir's life. If you don't know about that story, because it wasn't nationally advertised, please look into it. It's really, he's not a nice guy. And this whole, like you said, I think on your show earlier, crocodile tears thing of him. He's a very emotional guy, and maybe he's experienced bad things. I'm sure he's had people call him slurs. I've seen stuff online. I'm not saying no racism exists. Same with, Hal Johnson. I can't say he didn't have, I believe his claim was he had trouble with racism in the beginning of his career or something. I didn't look too hard into it. Yeah. It's hard to keep up with the racism accusations, but like you said, Mark, like, it's all over, and it's now in our government, embedded into Parliament. The accusations, riding on the coattails of different movements in the States, using a terrible death of a man in the States to further a narrative here, ignoring everything good we've ever done to combat racism, including our involvement in the Underground Railroad, for goodness sake. Heaven forbid we talk about the fact that we were a free place for a lot of the people escaping slavery in the States. We don't talk about that. We can't talk about positive things that anybody is doing, Caucasian or otherwise. It's so divisive. These politicians divide us, and then they blame all the citizens and they leave us to deal with the carnage while continuing racist policies and never addressing anything operationally. It's just talk and talk and talk, and it's destroying our nation. It drives me absolutely crazy, and the media are just right there with their salacious headlines, just lapping it up. It's disgusting.
Drives those clicks, right? Drives those clicks.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to the what you were talking about. Hal Johnson and what drove the comment about the racism, and you didn't really read the article. I didn't read the article either. You know why I didn't read the article? And this is important. It's because it was lying, right? Like, it's lying in the tweet. I know that Body Break was about fitness. I remember watching, I was a geeky kid, and I liked
Me too.
I liked watching the talking shows where people would talk. This is why I do what I do now, because I think that it's the conversations themselves are interesting. And when kids, Popular Mechanics for kids and stuff like that, those shows are, and I was a bit old for that at the time, but those kind of shows were the kind of shows I liked. So I saw an interview between Hal Johnson and Joanne McLeod, years later, probably 99 or early 2000s. And they were like, oh, we were so worried about the obesity epidemic and blah, blah, totally riding coattails to get on TV. And I can't blame them. I'm not saying they're bad in doing this, but you can't claim, oh yeah, we're definitely for health and fitness, for obesity and helping to fix obesity and childhood obesity and all sorts of other stuff. And then also at the same time, the whole thing's about racism too.
Oh, and also, did you not mention that we were actually all about fighting injustice? Oh no, you were just talking about salads and exercise and wearing really awesome 90s fitness wear that I will always remember. And I'm sure there's a lot of Body Break info embedded into my subconscious that maybe I even use to this day. Good for them if they were also simultaneously quietly, silently combating oppression, I guess. Yeah. Great, you guys, that's awesome. But it sounds like you just sort of made that up right now.
It seems on board. Yeah, it seems like the media is paying for these stories, and if you're like us too. I can't blame them, but it seems not tone deaf, just I don't know, And there was another point I was going to make, but I can't remember exactly what it is now. So it may come to you. It may come to me, but yeah, having it was the Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all. It's all kind of part of the same conversation. That's you can't possibly, use these people in this way and blah 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 blah. But it ignores the real history. Now, Uncle Ben, I know less of the history, but Aunt Jemima was a positive, a successful person who sold the brand and was one of the first black millionaires in the United States. This is not a small achievement. This is something to, if you walked around the grocery store, and I posted this the other day on Twitter, I appreciated seeing Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima because the racism thing was not much of a conversation until the mid 90s, I guess, mid 80s, maybe late 80s, early 90s. But you're walking, it was very normalized in Canada. It wasn't, we got a lot of news about black and white in the United States, especially Rodney King. That's what I'm talking about, that era, right? Those riots and the riots in Los Angeles. Yeah. So, that was kind of the flashpoint of the conversation at that point in time. And the black-white racism stuff didn't really exist here. And you walk down the grocery aisle and I don't know if didn't really exist, but it wasn't as in your face as the LA riots were, right? So you think, well, it's not touching us as much here. But having those brands in the store wasn't yeah, man, we're so racist to have those brands. It's just rebranding the reality of our world to be racist to fit into this narrative now is just inappropriate. And I'm glad people are fighting against it, but it's so weird to watch these brands fall like this.
It is, and I've heard people say, well, you're so triggered over, someone said triggered over maple syrup, and as a good Canadian, I've had to correct that and say, hey, that's not maple syrup, you guys, you don't even know. But that aside,
Yeah.
it's not about being triggered by one thing or another. It's when you see this continual pattern in society, and when you see these different products and these different companies, and the revision of movies, and it's really like book burning type stuff. We're talking about changing things retroactively under this assumption that it's somehow bad. And the thing with, like you were saying about Aunt Jemima, what bugs me is that was sort of a story of somebody who went from a really bad past and where there was racism involved, and the resilience and entrepreneurial spirit, right? And then to have that purchased and to make all of that money, I think that's a success story. I wouldn't think it'd be positive to remove that story.
Yeah.
I don't know much about Uncle Ben either, like you said, but I don't see how this is actually going to help anything, much like, tearing down statues. I'm with Ben Shapiro on that one. He said, there's a few people that maybe you don't want a statue of. I get that, but that should be democratically decided by the city through the councillors that they have voted in to have a debate about whether or not those statues should be removed. That should never be a bloodthirsty mob of people yanking down our history, changing. I've heard there's even people trying to sort of pretend like J.K. Rowling didn't write the Harry Potter book, sort of delete that from history. Harry Potter didn't happen because she's such a transphobe. I mean, it's really, we're at the point where people are traumatized by everything, and they want to just erase whatever it is that makes them feel bad, and it's getting pretty insane. So the syrup, I mean, you wake up, you turn on Twitter, and you're like, what ridiculous thing has happened today? Oh, they canceled Aunt Jemima. Hadn't thought that would happen, but sure, why not, right?
Well, and then when you're talking about rewriting history, if they're gonna tear down the statues of these people who built the country, regardless of the potentially terrible things they did, they can't be judged by our time. If you're going to tear down those statues, why stop in history? Like you said, they're going after Harry Potter too. So there's nothing that's sacred, right? Like we can prove that Harry Potter is right there, written by J.K. Rowling, and she wasn't a transphobe. That didn't exist when she was writing those things. So should Harry Potter be put through that lens? Is that something that should be?
It has nothing to do with trans issues. It's a completely, and this is where we, activism groups are not really that big, but the voices are loud, and the bullying is intense, and the mob and the online mob it's really something, and it takes down a lot of people, and you can just be canceled like that. And the artist Zuby, who I follow frequently, he said, we're at the point, if we haven't been for a while already, that basically what you say on social media makes you a good person versus your whole life. Being a good person means nothing. But if you say the right thing, and there's these hot button issues. So how you feel about the trans issue basically defines whether you're a piece of garbage or whether you're a saint. And you could be a saint in every other aspect of your life, but have traditional gender views. For example, as one example, immigration's another. There's so many of these. But no, you're on that side. You're bad. You're bigoted. You're uneducated. You're a rube. And it's just, we've just split into these camps now, and it's like you're canceled even though you've never heard a fly. I just find it, what I'm finding fascinating is continually a lot of these very soft-spoken ex-liberals, very nice people that always thought that they could, I'll be safe if I just take it, play it safe, and I don't say this or I don't do that, and they're still finding that they're being, like Brett Weinstein was such a good example. It's an old one now, but evergreen. I mean, that's a perfect example of someone who got blindsided, that never thought it would happen.
It can happen to you, and then all of a sudden the mob is showing up for you, and it's like, oh well, who did I tick off? It's and and I mean, you can say even conversations about racism or gender or anything, like anytime you touch on those kind of things, people get uncomfortable because who knows where the conversation is going to go. I mean, it is a very interesting thing to have conversations like this, because the mob is looking for their next target. And I mean, we're certainly not big enough. I'm certainly not big enough for that, I don't think. But and that's not, I'm not trying to insult anybody. I'm not trying to be self-depreciating either. It's just like there's a certain level, because when you do hit a certain at a certain level of popularity, the mob does come for you, right? And it's
once
like
you have an impact. Once they know you have an impact on the narrative, you're showing up in people's feeds. That's when they really start to come for you. Or when you're involved in politics, for example. That's also just a target. Just a target.
Well, and that's just that's you expect if you get into public life, you expect that. That's
you expect
you have to.
It's part of the game.
And moving on to lawmaking, we've talked racism. I think we've got it done. But moving on to lawmaking, New Brunswick, Bill 11 requiring mandatory vaccinations for children has been defeated. Now, there's talk about mandatory vaccinations for COVID-19. We've got Doug Ford in Ontario talking about how vaccinations are the only way to get back to normal, and Justin Trudeau saying similar rhetoric. Ford and Trudeau have similar rhetoric around the vaccinations, although I haven't been listening the last couple of days, so I don't know if that's changed. But up until, let's say, June 10th or 11th, they've been talking about that. So I'm interested to see mandatory vaccinations being struck down, and I don't know if this is a COVID specific vaccination law being struck down, or if it's just a general one. But I think that it not even sets precedent is something to talk about, because if they did try and roll this out Canada-wide, I wonder what kind of mechanism it would be. But this is encouraging, in my opinion. I don't think forced vaccinations should be a thing. I think, especially in this case, in COVID case, not this case. What do you think, Kelly?
Yeah, I'm with you there, and I'll try to be relatively brief on this topic, but it's one I'm passionate about because I've had health issues. You try a lot of medications, and you're asked to try a lot of medications, and some of them, it's part of why I speak about actually the trans kid issue, as I kind of mentioned earlier, because of some of the really hard-hitting, intense drugs that they're putting kids on that I've had to take for other medical issues as an adult that are hard on me. So I mean, I've been through the gamut of looking through drugs that have been taken off the shelf or have had lawsuits. I've been on drugs that have been removed because they find out, oops, we approved it, it went through, and 10 years later we realized it was having dire long-term effects. So that's just for the regular pharmaceutical industry. I'm not a full-blown, I'm someone that likes to balance Western and natural medicine, so I don't ever knock either of those sort of things too much, but you have to have balance. But when it comes to something like vaccinations or pharmaceuticals and what you're putting into your body, there's a few rules that I have. One, I don't try super new drugs, even if they've been approved by the FDA or associated relative body in your own country. Because, like I said, a lot of effects are discovered until 2 to 10 years. The statistics on that are staggering if you do the research. And I don't think that I want to put my body under that kind of stress. I don't think it's necessary, so I prefer older methods. Vaccines for me are the same. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've had my vaccines as a kid. If I had a kid, I'd probably give them not maybe a lot of the extra ones, flu vaccines, but major vaccines, fine. I'm not saying they're all bad. But when you look at this rushed vaccine for COVID or anything like it, not a chance. If it was Ebola and half of us were all dying and bleeding out of our eyes and it was horrific, I would be, you know what, maybe it's worth it. It's a risk-cost analysis in everything in life. To me, this is too high of a risk, and I don't want it. And I don't think it should be forced on the citizens. It's my body, my choice. You want to talk about my body, my choice? This is prime example of that.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's hard talking vaccines is just as fraught as talking gender and all of this stuff, because people are like, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer, and I feel similar. Like I had my mumps and measles. I have kids, I gave them the mumps and measles stuff. I'm not worried about that. It's got a lot of efficacy. We know that they do the job and blah 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 blah, or enough of the job that enough people are whatever. I had measles when I was a kid. So I don't want that. I don't want my kids to have that. And so German measles, so I wasn't vaccinated against German measles. My mom was like, he had the vaccine. Why did he get measles? And the doctor was like, oh, there's another strain, and this is what happened. So
they don't always work. That's the other thing is, that's why I'm not a flu shot fan, because it's sometimes doesn't even work, right?
I don't do the flu. I did 1 year, and that was the year I got the flu, and I was like, forget this whole flu shot thing. But yeah, that's it. The rushed vaccine from China, with Chinese military cooperation. Thanks, but I'm gonna skip that one, Justin.
Hard pass,
I'm gonna not get in line. And your re-education or your any of the potential sticks that you're proposing to use, like withholding taxes and stuff. And this is I don't know that any official communications about that have been released, so I don't want to make news. I'm not trying to make news, but any kind of incentive the government could potentially levy against me would not be outweighed by my need to not put that into my body, because you're right. You have to do a cost benefit analysis, and if bodies were stacking up and they were like, listen, we really don't want you to go outside of your house, because if you go outside of your house, 2 to 3 weeks later you could end up in the hospital, and that was actually happening. Okay, great, but that's not happening. The healthcare workers aren't being getting sick en masse. The hospitals are empty. The ICUs are empty. We have a huge amount of capacity. Guelph has had more deaths from from overdoses than COVID-19.
I was reading that, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just like, where is the emergency, right? And I don't mean to take this all the way back to COVID-19, but
Well, it's part of our world and affecting, I mean, especially Ontario, you guys are still locked down till what, July something now?
July 15,
so
According to an article I saw last night, July 15. Yeah. So it's very, I won't be having the COVID vaccine. I think mandatory vaccines.
No, thank you. Thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah, yes.
I'll politely decline like a good Canadian.
Like a good Canadian. No, thanks. We'll talk about it later.
That's right.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. I think that's a good place to end it. So thank you very much for joining me, Cal. Maybe next week we can do it again.
Anytime. Yeah, you know how to find me.
Perfect. Wonderful. And thank you for joining us, dear viewer. It's always nice to have you. If you've got a story you'd like me to chat about with Kelly or with Greg or with any of the other people I'm bringing on, and Brett, I'm going to be getting together with Brett soon as well. We got together yesterday, but we talked too long and I didn't have enough time to record. So
Brett Sears? Brett?
No. Oh, he's got a channel on my memory's not that good, but okay. I'll tell you after.
Cool.
Yeah, and I'll get the Prime Minister to play us out. So thank you for watching. Check out speakingmoistly.co. Check out canadapoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. And Kelly, do you have anything to plug?
Well, you can always check out my YouTube channel. It's a bit quiet at the moment, but just put out the Rubin Report interview, so that's always on there. And of course, Twitter is @KellyRDay19. So
perfect. Get in touch with Kelly or follow her on Twitter if you'd like. And the link for her YouTube is in the description. All right. And thanks for watching, everybody. Here's Justin.
Ciao.
Speaking moistly, keep 2 meters apart. Speaking moistly.